What's going on, everybody? This is Moose and Brian here from OccupyFantasy.com at Occupy Fantasy on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm your host, Moose, at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. Co-founder and data guru here at OccupyFantasy.com. Alongside Brian at BrianJesterFF on Twitter, co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. This is the Week 4 $1 Million Mission, where we're going to take Brian's lineups, his 150 max, small field, satellites, etc., review them, see how he did, see what other pros did, and see what we can learn about that along the way. How's it going, Brian?
What's up, Moose? Good to see you, as always. And yeah, as we'll see here in a little bit, we're reaching the point of the cycle of is all my money going to run out? Am I ever going to win again? Right? Which is always the last part of the cycle before a big hit comes, hopefully. And the cycle starts over again. So yeah, it's been a rough couple of weeks for me. Honestly, since 6 weeks with PGA, MMA, NFL, it's been a pretty rough stretch. So yeah, just powering through it, and doing these shows every week helps me face the music when a lot of people don't have to, right? They just push it off. But yeah, so we're gonna talk about the results here a little bit, but I'm more excited to talk about some of the strategy stuff for later in the show.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's kind of crazy when I sent you a screenshot last night, like, hey, I won 37 cents. Let's go. And you got to celebrate the small victories when they get them. So let's just jump right into it. Again, if you don't know, this is the $1 Million Mission where we review Brian's lineups. If you have questions, sure, go ahead and ask. If you just want to say hi and do a little wave emoji, you can also do that as well. So if we take a look here at some, this is how Brian's done year to date in 2022 NFL DFS GPPs this season. Small field, minus 2% ROI. I think you were +4, +7 last week, so you lost some there. 150 Max Classic, minus 76%, and 150 Max Showdown, minus 74%.
Yeah. So yeah, airballed small field a couple slates over the past since Thursday, right, with Showdown. But again, as we said last week, the 150 Max in both is pretty in line. And yeah, I had 0 game stacks with Seattle and Detroit this past week, so obviously that was a big disappointment. And when that game went off, I was basically drawing dead. I did have one live Milley lineup with a Russell Wilson stack that had the most player minutes remaining, and it had a good chance there. Of course, they scored like 3 points in the second half. So, but yeah, again, this is all pretty much in line, and yeah, that small field obviously sucks to dip into the red there, but that was the 1 week blip. Hopefully, we'll start getting it back this week.
I do find it interesting where we talk about how in 150 Max Showdown, it's very tough, very top-heavy payouts, and yet your ROI is better with 150 Max Classic. So I'm wondering, did you change your approach to anyway, or is that just kind of how it's just kind of rounding errors at this point?
Yeah, I guess it's just rounding errors, but as you know, you and I, we talk after every Showdown slate loss. We look at uniques and we talk about different things. And for the most part, I haven't been at the top of the uniques list, but this is something we talked about, and at least I've talked about on other shows, where in 2022 NFL Showdown, if you're getting 100 plus uniques, it's probably bad, right? There are some outlier slates, right, Moose, where it's like, okay, nothing matters here. Salary doesn't matter. Everyone should have a bunch of uniques. But most of these slates, if you're building 90, 100 uniques, it looks like your EV is pretty bad, I would think. So I'm sitting in the range where I am, and I think as a result, some of my ROI has improved a bit without really sacrificing the true upside. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I feel about the uniques in Showdown as of right now.
Yeah, I've noticed that. It's like I have to actually scroll down to see where you are on the uniques list that I run, and when I'm looking. But I think the biggest thing is, we've talked about it before. I think other people have talked about it as well, where there's a difference between a good unique, a bad unique, and then also a lineup that's duped. Maybe 1, 2. You and I internally do less than 10 dupes. I think if you get less than 10 dupes in a very large field contest, I think that's okay. And you're crushing in the less than 10 dupes. Now, if you went and said I have 4 uniques and my other 146 lineups are duped 90 times each, then we would probably have to sit back and I would have to pull you aside and say, "Come on, man, what are you doing?"
Yeah, and I'm for Showdown, again, if you guys have questions, right, this is the time to ask about high-level NFL strategy where we can go in depth about topics. We have a schedule plan, but again, your questions always take precedence here. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I see .bets, Eagles in the chat. What's up, guys? Yeah, as far as Showdown goes, right, I've been putting in dedicated efforts and really meticulously fine-tuning my micro. I know we talked about the macro versus micro approach here, but I saw a tweet that was interesting. Player Q, Neil Orfield, and Nerdy Tenor were talking about various things with how many chops have been happening in Showdown, right? So many dupes have been winning lineups. And the tweet that I found interesting, I can't find it right now, but Nerdy, who we know is a simulation heavy guy, and I think Neil asked him at some point, like, is it ever plus EV? Like, has your simulations ever told you that these like 100 plus duped lineups are actually plus EV and that they should be duped more? Or is it just always bad? And since Nerdy Turner's been playing, which has been like 3 years now, 4 years of Showdown slates, he said only once has a 100 plus dupe been plus EV in his model. And it was like a FanDuel single game slate where there weren't that many options. So if his simulations, which we consider to be one of the best, tell us that if you're playing those 100 plus dupes, they're really bad. Again, regardless of what you see on the internet, it's not something you should be striving to do or bragging about or counting your money 4 weeks into the season.
Definitely. So let's jump over to see how you did in live finals. Brian, I know you've been chasing live finals pretty close so far. You still only have that one entry in the King of the Beach, and you should have had a lot more, but GG, I guess.
Yeah, 4 second place finishes in NFL Week 4 for King of the Beach tickets. So yeah, that's super painful. I actually made some money on some slates in King of the Beach again, which is really hard to do on these qualifiers. The bankroll. I mean, just look at the FFWC, right? Like 50K in entry fees, got back $1,600. So literally have lost 48K chasing the live final. But again, this is something I was willing to do, right? I put money aside for this after having successful early start to the year. So yeah, minus 97%. WFFC is a little less top heavy, so minus 87%, and King of the Beach is the least top heavy of the group. So this is pretty much in line. We gotta start getting some tickets, most because the bankroll is not liking these airball slates.
No, it's not at all. But I've been studying your lineups, some other people's lineups as well, and I mean, pretty much have the right strategy down. Just got to get the execution. So that's pretty much it for your lineup review. Again, if you all have questions, definitely go ahead and ask. I'm going to go ahead and bring up DraftKings now, and let's see if I can get this to work.
Real quick, Miss, while you're waiting for that, we skipped in Pick'em this week. For those who've been following along on our Pick'em journey, in the Pick'em contest, you're allowed to skip 1 week. You have to skip 1 week. Moose, we found 4 or 5 games we liked, but we weren't willing to go all in on those games, which we would have had to do with our 10 entries. And so we used our skip, and maybe that forces our hand a little bit later down the year, but we both felt good about that strategy.
Yeah, and honestly, it would have worked out. We slipped a little bit because every pick over 20% covered the spread. I mean, Minnesota minus 2.5 was 45% in the DraftKings pool. That would be huge if they don't cover. Right. Another team was like 35% and they covered. Brian, it would have been too nice to ask if we skipped and the chalk didn't hit. But
well, the chalk is the year of the chalk, so the chalk was definitely going to hit, and we would have faded those teams anyways that we played. So is what it is. But I liked our strategy this week, and let's just hope we don't have another week like that where we're struggling to find 6-7 teams we like.
Definitely. So, all right. So I have up here on DraftKings, the actual DraftKings. This is the DK Milley maker. We have Hoop 2410 joins the Milley Club with a Seattle stack. If you want to talk about it, if you want to talk about it, Brian.
Stack is certainly one way. Congrats to Hoop, by the way. Been grinding a long time, so obviously congrats to him. Anyone who's been grinding for 10 plus years to win a Milley, you'd love to see it, regardless, right? So a lot of talk about this because there was a three stack, right? So Gino, DK, Tyler Lockett, run it back with Jamal Williams, Josh Reynolds, TJ Hawkinson. These lineups rarely win. I saw some interesting stats, right? Only once ever has a 6-man game stack, which is this. Has won a Milley in the past 5 years, I think. I think it was the infamous Bears fan lineup where he had 6 Bears in his lineup. The greatest accomplishment ever. So yeah, these relevant, but it was also a pretty unique slate with value and the rest of the weather games and all that we'll talk about. And to me, this is just studying lineups. We know how a lot of different players play, and for reasons that a 3-3 stack may have been viable this week, reasons that these mega game stacks have worked in smaller contests that we'll talk about here shortly. I don't think those are reasons who played this. I'm not getting into his head. I just know from his style of play, he jams chalk. We know that there are plenty of pros out there who do that. DFS Hofbrocking is one as well. To me, he just wanted to get over on a lot of the chalk, and without worrying about limitations or mins and maxes on game stacks, a lot of his lines ended like this because he played a lot of chalk. He always plays a lot of chalk. So it's not surprising to see that he ended up with a 3-3, and he allowed that through because he allows mega chalk lineups all the way. This was actually the chalkiest lineup when you add in product ownership or some ownership in the last 5 years of the Milley. So super chalky week all around. So breaking down his individual lineup, I don't think helps us too much just because we know what his personal play style is like. But there's other lineups, I alluded to it in Discord this week. Chipotle and Papa Gates, the brothers who play pretty closely, they crush NFL all the time moves, and they've had a pretty interesting strategy. We've seen it before from them, but they've been going pretty heavy at it this year.
Yes, and before we go to them, I do want to say really quick, I really wish Kingberg in third place, who ran, 37 or so, 33 of the same lineup, and got third. Now, if he got first, that would have been some king shit right there.
He was in first they were in first for a long time. The funniest thing about this is that, well, obviously, if he'd have won, it'd been the funniest thing. But he had 37 entries, and 33 were the same, and they just had 4 other uniques. So I don't know what this strategy was. If he just ran out of time to update their lineups. But can you imagine if this dude would have? How much did he end up winning? He won what? 11 times 30. What did he win though? He won a good amount of money, right?
Yeah,
like 300K,
like 350K or something like that.
All right, still a pretty good week, even though he was in line for like 5 million if he'd have got the top 30 places. But I mean, again, it goes to show, like, I mean, it was a chalky week, and as we've mentioned before, right, Moose, like, you can play chalk. There are people out there that do it very well, but you're competing with a lot more people, right? For us, the strategy we like to use and teach is that it's a lot easier if the chalk fails, and now you have less resistance to get to the top of the leaderboards. So
definitely, yeah. So you mentioned the other contest you wanted to talk about, and if we pull up over here, we have Chipotle Addicts lineup, and this is one of the Fantasy Football World Championship qualifiers, who also mega stacked, I guess as we call it.
Yeah, I guess it was. That's the term we're using, I guess, right? So this was the 470, I think, Moose, right? The $470 buy-in. And what this contest is, I've been playing it pretty much every week with obviously very little success. But the 470 is, it's like 170 people roughly, 5 entry max. So it's a really good shot if you can afford 470 per ticket, right? Really good chance at getting a live final ticket here. So this is Chipotle's second that he's won, I believe. He won in week 1 as well. So his stack was even greater, right? So you have Goff, Jamal Williams, Josh Reynolds, TJ Hawkinson, 4-man. Running back with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. So we got a 4x2 here, which is pretty crazy, right? I would think a 4x2. Because what do we normally recommend to people, Moose, right? 3x1, sometimes 3x2 in smaller contests, right? Because less you have to do to get right. But Chipotle and Papa Gates are taking that to the extreme. And I'm curious, where do you think, like, Moose, where do you think the opportunity cost holds here? Because obviously, if you just take it to the extreme, right, you stack 9 guys from the same game. You can't, right? But if you stack 9 and there's 12 games on the slate, that's too much, right? 3 maybe not enough. Is 6 too much? Is 8 too much? Right? There's a line somewhere, and Chipotle and Papa are I have some stats here, but Chipotle and Papa are pushing it. I'm just curious. I'm curious to get people in the chat thought. I'm curious to get your thoughts, Moose.
Yeah, and I mean, it's when you see something new that is different from your own. The first thing you go is, okay, have they done this before? What has the field done? How successful is this? I'm just trying to say it's hard to have 7 guys. Maybe in a small field like this, if NFL scoring is down, you pick a game and hope that game scores more than 10 points and your guys get some rotation in there. I could definitely see that happening in these 169 entries. Yeah, I definitely can see this being viable. I think it might be a little too many players, but Hey, I mean, it works for Chipotle, obviously.
Yeah, so obviously if the game scores 97 points, it works really well. Right. So let's take that out of the equation, right? Because obviously if it's worth 97 or 93, 100 points, everyone's gonna have flames in your lineups, right? Because there's so many players scoring well. But what the concept we talked about in 3x2 is for small field contests. Again, you don't need to be perfect to win. And if you identify a game environment, obviously a lot of people identify the Seattle and Detroit game environment, as Junior alludes to in the chat, that some defenses are really bad this year, like the Detroit and Seattle game. If you can identify a game environment, sometimes it's tougher to figure out who's going to go off in that game. But if you 3x2, or if you 4x2, or 5x2, whatever it is, right? You still have a pretty high floor if that game goes off, because you need a game to go off anyways to win a small field contest, right? So if a game goes off, you have a pretty high floor, but now you're giving yourself 5 chances at a ceiling. If the volume concentrates and you can get the one guy who scores 30 or 40 in your contest and he's 10% owned, you're one of 10 people that can win that contest now. So I get it, because it gives yourself more chances at finding the ceiling performance within a high scoring game environment. That's how I'm thinking about it most, and I think it makes sense for a small. Obviously, there's a tipping point on contest size, but I think for 200 players or less, 100 player leagues we talk about, I think that's how I'm thinking about it and how it would make sense.
Yeah, and it's tough because you want to have like this. I don't know which bias this is, but it's like the fear of missing out, maybe FOMO. It's like if I play 5 guys, yeah, in this instance, all 5 players absolutely dominated and got all flames. But you're thinking, okay, if let's say you play, I don't know, Metcalf and Lockett, and you're like, well, I want one of them to blow up. Both of them can't blow up, and if I only play one and I play someone else hoping that they score as much as well, like there's only scoring so concentrated unless there is 93 points scored, and so yeah, it does feel weird thinking about it from that sense of if you play everyone, not everyone can go off, and so if you have like a fear of missing out.
Yeah, definitely. No, it definitely a fear of missing out. But I think also one of the keys here, we talk about adding in running backs or tight ends, especially to game stacks. And why not do that here, right? If you have a 3x1, fuck it, just throw in the tight end too. Now it's a 4x1, and now the tight end gets the extra correlation boost. Or no, hell, let's make it a 4x2. Get the other running back. Running backs have been pretty terrible for the most part. Let's get that correlation boost. So like, look at it. If you just type in Chipotle in the little search box, we can see his 5 lineups here. And let's look at the stack types he used in this individual contest in week 4. Week 4. Because he had a pretty crazy stack outside the Seattle game as well. So if you want to click through and just count them, because I'm like 10 seconds behind you on the live stream.
Yeah, so it looks like he had a, what is this, 1, 2, 3, it's a 3x2, 3x3.
Right? Yeah, let me see, 3x3, I think. I guess I could pull it up too. That would help.
Yeah, he had 3x3 here.
Okay.
Next lineup.
So let's go through 3x3, yeah.
Then he also had a 3x2.
Not that crazy.
Is this a 3x2? Is this a 2x2? God, I can't count. 2x3?
Yeah, I think it's a 2x3, yeah.
Okay, yes, 2x3. Okay. This next one is
when you have to control F it to find the game.
To count how many are there. Yeah, that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 2?
That's a Chargers game, right?
Yeah.
That's the one I'm curious about. Let's look at the last one, then we'll talk about the 5x2.
Okay. And then we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 0.
So this dude's all over the place, right? Like it's like just like throwing everybody off the scent. Like, well, what kind of lineups am I playing? The 5x2 specifically, Bismo messaged me at like 1:30 on Sunday. I was like, yo, did you see this? Because at the time it was like at the top of whatever contest Bismo was in. He's like, do you see 5x2? It's crazy. He's like, it's got to be too much, right? He's like, I don't know. I guess it is, right? And then like as I was telling you before we started streaming, like 30 seconds after Bismo sent me that, Dameon Pierce ran for like an 80-yard touchdown, and Chipotle's 5x2 just like leaps everybody. So yeah, I mean, I think it kind of makes sense. So I have the stats here, and I've looked at the 470 every main slate. I haven't looked at Papa Gates. It's gonna be pretty similar because they play a similar style and they work together. But if you look at the type of stacks that Chipotle has played in small field contests, this $470 line, 170 player 5 max. He's played a 4x1 stack 4 times, 3x3 stack 4 times, 3x1, 3x2, 4x2 twice, and the rest of these stacks he's played once each. 4x0, 5x1, 2x1, 2x3, which you just alluded to, 5x2, 5x0. So all different kinds of stacks. The 3x1, the most traditional that we talk about, just twice out of 20 times that he's played a 3x1. And again, these are guys that, again, let's ignore any outside talk about how they play together, if how they work together, what their player pools look like. Let's ignore all that. Because even if you do that, you still have to win contests, and they do very frequently in NFL. They win the Wildcat very often. I say they, Poppy Gates, Chipotle, right? They're very good NFL players. So clearly they've found something to think this is right. And Chipotle himself has had 2 live final ticket wins in 4 weeks in this specific contest using these crazy stack types. So pause. Let's think about that. How does that make sense for us moving forward? Does it make sense for us? Because, yeah, we could say that the Detroit game Moose scored 93 points this week. And, yes, this with the weather games and some shitty totals, yes, this maybe was a week to do it. But they've been doing it every week with success. So what do you think?
It's tough because, like, you pull up this lineup here, the 5x2, and I talk about that fear of missing out. I mean, even though they scored 58 points, which if you have a game stack and you're scoring 58 points, your first thought is, oh, I'm winning my contest. He finished 18th. Josh Palmer had
that's because the other games scored 93. So
yeah. So it's tough. So in isolation, yeah, I mean, like you have, Palmer scoring 3.5. That was my point, alluding to like fear of missing out. Like,
right.
Is that too much to have? Where could you have picked any other 5K player and potentially got with a higher upside in isolation?
Right.
It's almost because I was gonna say, like, if everything is correlation, then nothing's correlation. So
yeah, I mean, so like, right? Is that too much? Right? Is playing Palmer and Everett together too much? Right? Because there's only so much to go around. But because maybe if you don't play Eckler, right? Because now you're just hoping Herbert throws 4 touchdowns. But Eckler runs for 2 touchdowns. Yeah, you get the Eckler points, but now Palmer's missing out on some. Everett's missing out on some. So maybe 5x2 is too much. But the one thing is that these are very concentrated target trees. No Keenan Allen. So it's going to be Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Gerald Everett, pretty much exclusively in the passing game. Eckler, I still don't get the Eckler play. I know he was pretty popular across the industry last week. Still only played 50-something% of the snaps. Just got to the end zone 3 times this week. So I think that was a pretty bad play overall. Pierce dominating touches on the other side. Cooks underperforming wide receiver dominates targets. So like 5x2, I get it. Really, you're doing these mega stacks for teams where we know where the ball is going, right? Most we're not going to 5x2 like a Kansas City game, or probably not even 5x2 some game where we don't know who the second, third, fourth options are. So maybe that's the key to it. Yeah,
and I was actually going to ask you. You mentioned that wide receiver was out for the Chargers. Was there any injuries, I can't remember off my hand, of the Seattle and Denver side that would concentrate targets?
Seattle and Denver, or Seattle and Detroit, you mean?
Sorry, Seattle and Detroit, sorry.
Yeah, so that was the key there. And that's why so many lineups at the top of the Milley and other contests won that, because Amon-Ra St. Brown was out, DeAndre Swift was out, DJ Chark was out. So now we had super underpriced guys in Jamal Williams, Josh Reynolds, and of course TJ Hawkinson has a career game at his highest ownership ever. So yeah, those are the guys that were going to get the ball, right? And then on the Seattle side, they really only throw to Metcalf and Lockett at the receiver positions. Rashad Penny was way too cheap. So yeah, everybody in that game was far too cheap for their roles. It just so happened that every single one of them ceilinged because it's 193.
Yeah, and so I wonder if we talk about it a lot where, wide receiver cornerback matchups don't matter unless the cornerbacks are injured and you're playing against practice squad people or whatever like that. Wonder if you can modify your game stack. We talk about modifying our game stacks with rushing quarterbacks like Lamar. Maybe you do a 2x0, 2x1. Maybe we do where if we know only 3 wide receivers are going to be getting targets, let's just 4x1 it and small field contests. I could definitely see that being the case.
Yeah, for sure. And Star-Lord's that's are they playing these types of stacks in the large dollar contests like the 4-4-4-4. And yeah, the 4-4-4-4 is only 600 entries. So maybe that's still within whatever range they're looking at, Moose, because Chipotle's top performing lineup in the 4-4-4-4 finished 4th, almost won the Milley with it. And that was a 5x1 Detroit stack. His 13th place lineup was a 3x3 Seattle stack. His 31st place lineup was only a 2x2 stack.
Mhm.
Moving on down, he played at that 5-2 stack again. So 1, 2, yeah, Jesus Christ. So 5x2 stack. So yeah, they're still doing it in 600 player contests. As far as beyond that, I haven't looked at it this week, but I don't think they're doing that beyond those types of contests.
Okay. And dot best raises a good question here. This definitely eliminates the amount of stuff you need to get right if you guess the right game. But how many points would a game have to score to make this viable in a week? Obviously, if they scored 95, 93 points, that gets you there.
Viable.
But, and we saw it, what was it down here, is 18th place lineup. They scored 58, and that wasn't even close. So, do you really need, somewhere between 50 and 90 points of a game?
Here's a key. Here's a key difference between the two. All those guys in the Detroit game were underpriced.
Mm-hmm.
The Chargers game, pretty much everyone was appropriately priced. Well, I guess we could say Brandon Cooks was underpriced for his role. Pierce probably underpriced for his role. Everybody on the Chargers side was appropriately priced, relatively speaking. So you're going to need more points to be scored when guys are appropriately priced. But if we can identify game environments like the Seattle-Detroit game where guys are underpriced, honestly, that game could have scored 40 points and all those guys could have gotten there, right? So it's about the value you need from the salaries that you're playing. Like if you tried to somehow stack the Buffalo Baltimore game this week and 5-2 stack that's not going to work because it's too much. Like they'd have to score 300 points. Yeah. So it depends on the game, and I think honestly the cheaper guys is where you're going to mega stack, not the expensive games. Because I saw one of his only 3x1 stack that he played was a Chiefs, the Chiefs Week 1 game. It was a 3x1 Chiefs stack, which is very normal.
Okay, yeah. So that that makes perfect sense. So I'm curious, Brian, are you going to be upping your stacks games? I know the model isn't released for this week, but are you thinking about potentially upping your stacks in these contests?
I'm definitely thinking about it, and it makes sense. Because I considered it this week like Cleveland, Atlanta, even though they decided to run 100% of the time. Like I could have very easily played Mariota, CPAT, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, running back with Nick Chubb, Amari Cooper, Njoku, whatever, right? Like some combination of those 7 guys. And that would have made sense because we know all the volumes going through those guys. It didn't because they ran every play. Ideally, we get teams that pass more than once every quarter. But I think there are games where it makes sense. It definitely makes sense in some games. So I'll be looking at it more closely this week.
Okay, cool. If you guys have any more questions, we're usually here for 30 minutes, which is about now. Brian, do you have any last comments or concerns while we wait for the final questions?
No, let's just get a winning week. Spike week's coming soon. It's going to come once my bankroll is depleted enough to where I can no longer chase the live finals. Right.
Oh, yeah,
very next week, I'm gonna spike everything. So, a spike's a spike, so I'll take it. Let's keep grinding. I know someone else earlier in the chat has talked about 4 weeks of data under our belt. Yeah, I felt good, right? We were all in pretty much. We told everyone to fade the weather games. We were right there. The Vegas and Denver game was a pretty decent scoring stack. Cleveland, Atlanta started hot, again turned into a run fest. And then we just missed the Detroit game. The total dropped. I assumed that the injuries would be too much to overcome on Detroit side. It clearly wasn't. They busted like 10 explosive plays of like 50 yards or more. So, again, it's what it is. I still think we're hitting on a lot of the right spots. So, let's keep pushing on.
Definitely. One final point I do want to get your opinion on, since this is a lineup review. This is the first year FanDuel has done defenses in their single game, and last night a defense captain won. My question to you, one second. Hey Google, stop. Can you tell my laundry's done? But so trying to think me through with one less spot. How does do you think we should captain defenses? If so, when? Or if no, what kind of how should we be playing defenses on FanDuel?
I think what San Francisco was 2% last night or something. Mm-hmm. That seems like 1.99% too high to me. So, a lot has to go right for a defense to be MVP. It happened twice so far?
I
Or
think it's just once.
this year?
Just once.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think you just let the rake slowly pay itself. I wouldn't MVP them. It's about the same as MVP and kickers. I mean, it's got to be a really weird game script, and I would just rather miss out on those slates that happen once or twice a year than to just play them every slate. So yeah, I don't know. I understand the appeal, but I think it's still overplayed, even despite how little it is being played.
Makes sense. And let's see here. So Junior says there were several games where both side running backs went off 2 last week. Do you see those as viable as a secondary 1-by-1 stack?
It can, but again, we were talking about how running backs have sucked basically all year. A lot of it comes down to their lack of usage in the passing game. A lot of running backs got into the end zone this week, so yeah, I don't think it is moving forward. No, I don't. I wouldn't be 1-by-1ing just because it worked this past week.
Makes sense. Cool. Cool. So I think that'll pretty much wrap it up. Yeah, that'll wrap it up. So just for future reference, Brian and I will be back Saturday talking NFL, and then Chris does the live Discord Q&A on Sunday mornings, or I think, Brian, you did it last week. But either way, someone will be there. Until next time, listen, Brian from Occupy. Have a good night.